Okay, this meeting is now being recorded. Welcome, everyone. I always have to look at the date. To the October 15th iteration of the MicroProfile live Hangout. Everyone that joins the call, please enter your name in the meeting minutes. A link to the meeting minutes should be in the chat. It is everyone's shared responsibility to take notes as we go along, so please, please, please help out by taking notes. Also, if you are not speaking, please leave your microphone on mute. Okay, so what I will do is I will kick off the first topic, which is the typical topic, roadmap updates. So MicroProfile 3.1 was released Saturday. The original target was, I think, Tuesday of last week, but we had tons of problems getting the bits released to Sonatype. So I waited for what I thought was, well, we tried multiple times throughout the week. And I waited for a time where I thought it wouldn't be too busy, which was Saturday night, and did the release then. Everything worked out okay. So the bits were pushed, and we have, you can see a link to the release along with a tweet, and Cesar, I think, also pushed out the maybe slide deck as well, the updated slide deck. So any comments on MicroProfile 3.1? Alrighty then. MicroProfile.next. I don't know if we're going to cover that specifically first. It looks like we have a couple of other items that relate to this. Oh, I apologize. Let me share my screen. I forgot to do the share here. Share Chrome. Holy cow, how many windows do I have open? Brave. Here we go, Google Chrome. Okay, let me maximize the window and increase the font or the view. There we go. How's that, everyone? Is it being shared? All right.
Yes, perfect.
Let's see. Let's move on to the Jakarta EE8 discussion. And if we have to, we'll float back to the roadmap, MicroProfile roadmap. Let's get some of these other ones discussions going. So, Ken?
Sure. So we had a discussion in, well, I'm trying to think, maybe it started even before then, but we certainly had a discussion in last week's MP architecture call around the idea of moving to Jakarta E8 APIs. Firstly, whether it was a good thing. Those on the call generally thought so, and I followed up with a mailing list thread where most people seemed agreeable that yes, it made sense to update to Jakarta E8 APIs as soon as we could. Then kind of as a consequence of that, if we wanted to make the February 2020 release use Jakarta E8 APIs, then it becomes a question of whether the APIs, the change to Jakarta E8 is enough to justify a 4.0 or whether a 3.2 is sufficient. Certainly the view, I think the overall view on the call from the architecture last week was that because the APIs are binary compatible, that it wasn't a breaking change, even if it might mean adjusting some dependencies in projects for users, maybe, depending on how they've got their project set up. But we wanted to kind of open it up to this group for a final discussion and decision, so that we can basically put it in the plan so specs can start updating to use the Jakarta E8 APIs when they're building snapshots and things like that. So open to the floor for comment or discussion.
Gordon, yeah, sorry. I was just trying to fill the space here off to, I know Gordon done some work. Did someone else have a comment?
Yeah, I was thinking we have 2 times a year a breaking change release, right? So if it's going to be a breaking change
One
release.
time.
Oh, I thought 2 times.
No,
So-
let me rephrase.
Okay.
We can have as many as we want, but we're kind of, for now, presuming that we would have no more than one a year as a goal. But extenuating circumstances, we can always have more if we so choose.
Yeah, and I just replied to the thread on that in the Google group saying June is kind of the release where we agreed to do that, but that's, to Ken's point, set in jello. We will release as we kind of need to release based on external factors or spec available. You know, if we have a bunch of specs that are ready to do a major release, maybe we'll rethink that. But anyway, sorry, go ahead, Edwin.
Yeah. So if it's not set in stone, and
Or 20.
we will at least we come to agreement that we want to adopt the Jakarta E APIs as soon as possible. Why just not do it in February if there are no objections, and just get out of the way with it?
Yeah, I think that's kind of general consensus. I think it's just go with the Jakarta E8 consumption for the February release.
And
I
as a
think
3.2,
I think it's unanimous that it's February. Everybody wants February, and that's the question, Ken. Is it major or minor? I kind of vote for minor because there aren't really API changes per se, but that's my perspective.
Well, I mean, isn't it that some other spec also wanted to have some breaking changes in the past, but didn't make the cut? So it would be their good point in time for breaking changes, and then we would go for 4.0. No?
Actually, originally I brought this up because in the fault tolerance and config, we potentially want to do some backward incompatible changes. I think with the discussion on the mailing list, the people saying if we do a major release and also together with the Jakarta E8, is we might send a strong message to the communities like Jakarta E8 is a backward incompatible change.
okay, so we're kind of conflating two things here. Let's focus on the Jakarta E8 API update first, because we need to reach a consensus that doing that API update isn't a breaking change for MicroProfile, and therefore we can do it in a 3.2, irrespective of what other specs might want to do.
Yes, for me, I also agree because it's only a change of Maven artifacts, so the rest is binary compatible. I would say that the 3.2 is sufficient.
Yeah, I'm okay with minor release as well.
Okay,
I
does
think
anyone disagree? Okay, I'll take that as agreement. So what I'll do is I'll follow up in that thread just to say that we agreed here that A, yes, it made sense to update, and B, yes, we think it would be a MicroProfile 3.2 for February. So could all specifications start updating their snapshots and stuff to do this? So I will probably create, I was going to say Jira's, geez, GitHub issues for each of the specs to do the update, because obviously everyone's going to need to do that. Oh, shoot. I just had a thought. If we're updating to EE8 for Jakarta, I should say, for February, do we need to enforce every spec to release a minor version that uses those new artifacts to prevent like double artifacts occurring?
I think
although they're binary compatible, we don't want to end up with one of each.
I think it makes sense everywhere we mention Jakarta. and adopt a bigger bunk.
Do the child specifications like inherit the dependencies like the Jakarta EE dependencies from parent?
No.
Yes, they do. They can do though.
Well, they don't at the moment. That's the thing.
Yeah. Okay. But sorry. After you, Ken. Sorry.
No, I'm done.
I've just been investigating that this afternoon, and I've just put an append in the chat.
I think so far we have been failing with a common parent POM for these kind of things. And each spec has their own parent POM, which does not link to a common MicroProfile parent POM. There were a few efforts to do that, finally do that and fix that, but I'm not aware that we really did it.
Yeah. So, for example, I've been looking just about 10 minutes ago. Actually, you can see if you do Maven, dependency tree, it prints out a nice tree of things that are being pulled in, and it's just exactly as the previous speaker said that they're not all using dependency management and a parent POM to pull in the transitive dependencies of Jakarta or JavaX, but they could. So, and it would resolve onto the class path, and it would build fine, even though it's typically not best practice to rely on a transitive dependency. I think if it's via a parent POM, then it's slightly different. So it's technically possible, and you can have a play around with it. If you look at the pull request I put into the MicroProfile base.
I mean, I know that can complicate the matters about when an individual project wants to move forward on a particular sort of version of some dependency, but I think that the Jakarta EE specs I don't think that may come up as a problem that often. So yes, having the dependencies in a dependency management block within a parent, and then the sub ones can just say CDI or just JAX-RS or whatever it might be without needing to specify a version, or whether it's Jakarta, Java, etc., then I think that sounds like a nice coordinating point for across all the specs.
I'll just say that something like this will definitely need to go to the mailing list, because I know over the last couple of years there's been many discussions about creating a parent POM, and from my recollections it usually seems to be split 50-50 as to whether to do it or not. So we'll have to see if that sentiment has changed.
We certainly need to coordinate in some ways. Once things split, we can't have one spec going to obviously Jakarta CDI and another spec going to JavaX CDI. So that freedom,
right. So I think definitely
going to have to go anyway.
3.2 release, every spec will need to do a minor release that uses the Jakarta APIs instead of the JavaX ones. It's then a question of whether that's tied into creating a parent POM at the same time for everyone to use, or whether everyone's doing it on their own.
I think here's maybe some kind of investigation can be done to see how quickly we can introduce a parent POM. If not, we could each spec just change the Maven coordinate, and then we can raise another issue to investigate later about the common parent POM. I think to see how much effort needs to be done. But I think it's kind of we need to target the February release and get that done.
I think another relevant issue is if we have these CIEs, if we were talking about how do we manage a CIE in a transitive dependency, and if we don't have a central place, then it's sort of less managed, I think.
I think the other thing to be careful of, I guess, with the suggestion of having a parent POM is just how much you try to push into that parent. So yes, it might only be just Jakarta E is one of the only dependencies declared in there, but it still serves a good sort of purpose. You know, when a Jakarta 9 comes out, for instance, that will be that centralizing place. And as long as you keep it relatively light, then hopefully that would mean that people don't feel too constrained by that parent POM and the dependencies defined there, or having excess bloat that the child's sort of projects don't necessarily need or want. And I know with dependency management, you don't inherit those dependencies as such, but yeah, I guess it is, if you make those parents complicated, I think that's where people start to get cautious of it, really. So
can we get into trouble if we allow 2 different specs to include different versions? You know, if 2 specs include slightly different versions, they'll come from different Maven central jars.
yes.
And then I think one of them, whichever one is ahead in the class path, will get kind of invisibly overridden anyway, wouldn't it?
It's also the highest number. It's not always the first one. Sometimes when it's more complex ones, you can have that the first one in the dependency tree is taking precedence. But normally it should be the one with the highest number. But that's not always correctly done within Maven.
But I'm referring to runtime. So I'm thinking about at runtime, you know, the Maven versions are completely gone, but the different jars will be on the class path, but one of them won't have classes pulled out of it.
Then it's the first one in the class loader.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing that was interesting to hear though is that it's the platform or the runtime that actually provides the jar files, isn't it? For, I mean, I guess there's an API jar maybe, and then some import behind that by some vendor. But just because you put Jakarta E in the POMs for the MicroProfile specs, etc., doesn't mean you necessarily get a Jakarta E binary when you deploy it on a runtime.
No, it's completely unrelated.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. So basically, the app just import the package. The package is kind of the same as before. They could like a build time we bind it to the Jakarta jar, and the runtime is completely different. Maybe it's find the Java E jar, but that's kind of runtime thing.
So I guess really the point I'm making is that on this occasion, the move to EE8 and whether we have a parent POM, etc., is okay, great. But the real problem will come once the package renaming happens.
The build time
catching up.
Yeah.
Which I guess is always a problem. You know, not always a problem per se, but a thing the application developers have to deal with is what version of MicroProfile does a runtime actually support. So maybe that's not a thing new really, but that's just something to consider, I guess.
Yeah, so we can control as far as the build time, and runtime is something different.
So I guess my vote would be yes, have a parent POM, maybe without thinking about it more deeply, a parent POM that does define at least the Jakarta version, and that coordinates the sub-specs, and at least just minimally that, and then that acts as a point at which to coordinate, you know, major and minor releases of the MicroProfile spec. I don't know quite how that plays with the BOM file for MicroProfile that apps could pull in. I'm guessing there's a relationship there as well.
So if you have a look at the pull request that's in the chat, you'll see I've actually written one in the top level POM, and then you can just to kind of illustrate what's possible, and then you can Maven -d Jakarta, and you can see dependency : tree, and you can see what it does, or you can not do it.
Right. Okay. But so that there's a BOM which is what you've imported there, but I guess it'd also be separately a parent POM file that the specs inherit from, and those would be two separate things. Because the BOM is down to the specs, so it collects up the different versions of the different specs. But I think there would be a relationship with a separate parent POM file that has a dependency management in it for the dependencies that the child specs inherit, possibly.
Well, I maybe wrongly, I put the dependency management section because there already was a dependency management section in this POM XML. I think it was being used as a parent, but I pushed it down into a couple of profiles.
Yeah, sorry. I think what will happen is so if I have an application that uses that imports that POM file in my dependency management, then yes, I get to say just include health and say it's provided and job done. And because of that, I think I also inherit all of the transitive dependencies. So the Jakarta Java E thing is sort of dealt there, but that's also referring down to the health, the metrics, etc. APIs. Though sort of separately to that, each of those specifications if we had a parent POM, would need to refer up to something, and I don't know whether that would be the BOM file or would be a separate parent POM.
I think you can do it. I think you can do it the same thing. I think so far
you can combine them into one.
That's what we've got at the moment.
Okay, fair enough.
So I have a question. So it's at the moment when we build a microservice, we specify a BOM dependency, like the dependency we just say MicroProfile -30, and with that, it pull in all the dependencies and etc. However, that's only run the active the profile. I haven't. It's not clear to me. What if we come up with these two flavors, and but it's only one active, so the other one is not active. So what's the real use to have two then?
So just before anyone answers, I'm gonna bottom of the hour.
Maybe
I'm gonna time cap this. So just 5 more minutes. Go.
I think the example that Gordon made for that dual POM is just for showcasing that that you can have one or the other. I don't think the idea is that to release it as such, or am I mistaken?
Right, it just have a one or the other.
Hey, Gordon, I see you keep trying to talk, but you're on mute.
Yeah, people get confused, but they don't have to be, because they can go and look at the real code, and you can play with it, and you can do a Maven -D, and then you can do dependency tree. You can see what it's resolving, and people can throw bricks at it, and it's completely as it is, and it does pull in transitive dependencies, and I've linked to documentation, and so I don't think at the moment we haven't got a separate. Well, I might be wrong. I don't think we've got a separate BOM from that parent POM there, and it already had dependency management in it. So it's just I've just made it concrete, and you can see in the pull request what it does, and exactly right. It's just an illustrative thing, but I'm really keen to help Jakarta. So anything that makes it clear that it's really easy to switch between one and the other, I'm a big fan of. And it's not something users have to. Users don't have to write it. So if some users won't be able to, their Maven will be it'll be a bit too complicated for the normal Maven use, but they don't have to write it, and you don't even really have to understand it that well.
Right. Okay.
I'm assuming we're using one default. We'll have a default profile. So under normal circumstances, if they take 3.2, it would just use the the Jakarta dependencies, but if you want to change the profile with -d to make it use Java, you can do, or you can
Oh,
sort of
so
a POM file to make it more permanent than just doing it on the command line.
right, okay. So it's basically is like there's still one active profile, and then by default you will get the Jakarta, and then you can specify -p and then to use the other profile, and you can get a Java EE, right? So I will try to play with it. I haven't spent too much time to go through this command. We'll see.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
But I think that those profiles are only available within your own POM file when you use it as a parent or a POM file, not when you use it as a regular dependency. But anyway, it will be helpful if they can see and play with it if they like.
Right.
Hello, everyone.
Gordon, you're still muted.
If you were to build against a jar in Maven, it pulls out the original jar's POM, and that will operate depending on the profiles that are within it, and then that will affect the transitive dependencies that get pulled in, and then those will be used in your, i.e. the client's build.
I
or
think,
not.
as Rudy mentioned, I think that's only applicable if that POM is used as a parent. If you import if you import that POM as a scope dependency management, then you only get the dependencies, you don't get the profiles.
We can try it out one of these days. Let's close this discussion because we are trying to find some technical solution, and we should just try it out.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm
into the forum. Sorry, I just one little thing on this. Just I did post a little thing in the forum which allows you to override the Jakarta EE with the Java EE. You can disable transitive dependencies and add in your own as a swap out mechanism. I put that in the forum, but sorry, carry on.
all right. Actually, we did a pretty good job self-moderating. I didn't have to lay down the law on that one.
I joined in a great time.
Yeah. Okay. Next topic is Alex, logging.
Okay, so I met up with Heiko, sadly a long time ago now, about trying to continue my efforts with the logging spec. This is just a public service announcement type thing, really, to say that I've tried again, something that's much more closer to like an SLF-J API. But the main particular points really are it's a way of sort of generating structured data and sort of extending that as an application, but also doing span logging for tracing. Now, I know open tracing is kind of moving towards being open telemetry, but I don't really know exactly what the timescales are for that. So at the moment, it's using the open tracing API. So there is a GitHub repo, which I've linked to there, which now also does include the spec that I've originally had in the sandbox, and I've kind of taken out and rewritten to better reflect the bits I've done. So if you are interested and you feel like having a little look and giving me some feedback, that would be great. Or whether you just think it's not worth pursuing any further, that would be good to know as well. But hopefully, because of its, like I say, it's using some Java 8 stuff, so like it's using lambdas for each of the methods, so it's a bit lazier about when it calls a function, the logging to get the log message. As I say, you can extend the data. The whole point of this really would be to give you a standard API for MicroProfile based apps, so you've got portability there, but also the structured data then gives you a mechanism for when your logging is eventually hitting the console or standard out or wherever it might be going, and it's in JSON format. Then that data, when it makes it all its way to a log aggregator like the Elk Stack or Loki or whatever, then that gives you a richer data set to sort of filter your logging on, etc. So it's kind of making its way sort of top to bottom, really. But anyway, as I say, have a look. feedback would be welcomed. By all means, you can either open issues on GitHub, or if you can email me. I think my email address is in the the Google groups or whatever. So yeah, that's about it really. Thanks.
My feedback to you, Alex, because you're working directly in the Git, is to avoid private conversations with you because that is a waste of time for you and for that person. So we work openly. Just don't ever propose someone to contact you privately. Otherwise, your daily job will be in danger and you will look like an ass. So don't do it. Just avoid it.
Okay.
Alex is great. Thank branch. This is on your personal GitHub.
It is, yeah. So I started this off as just trying to get the structure right and follow the patterns of the other MicroProfile projects. Starting really with the API, and then it's sort of, as I got further through it, I ended up sort of putting the spec in there as well. I can certainly transfer all of that into the sandbox, but again, it was before I went and did that, if somebody had, or enough people had, a cursory glance and said, yeah, okay, look, this looks reasonable to kind of open a PR in the sandbox and start to progress it that way, then I'm happy to do so. It was just because I'd ended up sort of getting further down the road than I kind of realized I'd got. I thought, well, I may as well just wrap it up here and have it somewhere clean to start with, and then go from there wherever I get directed to go, really.
Yeah. So basically, sandbox is zero entry. So zero bar entry. So it would be good if you kind of drop your idea to sandbox, and then we can all take a look. You will get more traction rather than your personal GitHub.
Okay, I'll put it in there then, and I'll open a PR then.
Emily, you totally nailed it. You're so awesome.
Thank you. You are awesome as well.
Okay, I also added a link right here. Basically, just reuse the same discussion. Let's not start another discussion. Let's just continue to use. This is a recommendation. I mean, to use the current logging discussion, just so it's all in one thread.
Okay, yeah, I guess
yeah,
once I put stuff in the once I've migrated it all over to the sandbox. And open the pull request, I'll post into that thread to say it's there. Have a look.
Okay, awesome. Heiko is being very mysterious.
Now I'm like wondering, what the hell? I love it.
No, I mean it's pretty profound. I'm started working in a different department within Red Hat, still in engineering, but won't work too much with Java and Java app servers and frameworks like MicroProfile. So I will probably not have too much time to do any work here, and so I'm stepping out of MicroProfile for a while. May come back, may not come back, don't know yet. I mean, I'm not out of the world, I'm not leaving Red Hat, and I will certainly do my duties next week at EclipseCon Europe with being the Red Hat booth, running the Cloud Native Java community day and town hall stuff. But if it's quiet around me, you now know why.
Wow, it's sad to see you are going.
Yeah, this blows, but
we see you, Nick.
Mm-hmm. Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, I am done. I said Heiko is being great to work with.
Thank you.
From my side, Heiko, we are going to miss your smiley face and the beers and the cool T-shirts. You're so amazing.
Thanks.
It's one thing that this brings up, because you are one of the first microprofilers that are a committer that is saying, I'm going to step a little bit away from MicroProfile, maybe forever, maybe for a while, you have commit access. And we want to make sure you keep it, because it's likely that the meta doesn't go to Red Hat, but it goes to you for the work done each day. It doesn't matter if you were assigned it or not. You did a fantastic job. So that continues to be the reality. We never really talk about the formality of keeping up with the commits status. And I think this is for future thought, that from my side, as a contributor and as a committer, we want to make sure that you don't go to historical committers, because you're not changing Red Hat, you're not changing jobs, but also, even if you went 6 months and you came back, you can do it in your off time. I am not saying I expect you to, but MicroProfile goes beyond the employee, right? It goes for something that you enjoy. This is like sometimes, like a fun recharging thing for many whom I have heard this kind of feedback.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unlikely, but I just need to concentrate on other things and can't really commit to continue doing my best over here or trying to do something good here. So I guess it's better that I step out and leave the space to others. And with Jan, I have an awesome colleague doing work, and then there's still Don and Felix and the others in the MicroProfile metrics group that do awesome work. So I think everything is in good hands anyway.
Yeah,
Well,
we'll miss
thank
you,
you for
Heiko.
being amazing and
you.
transparent.
Okay, so I am going to move on to the next item, MicroProfile 2020 roadmap. This is Emily. I'm going to pull it up here. Go for it, Emily.
You were sharing your email, I think. Oh, yeah, this is like, okay.
And I think Emily's frozen. I think she's logging back in again.
I was going to say.
So maybe this is a good time. I didn't want to give up entirely. I kind of held off on talking about MicroProfile.next. We know we want the Jakarta APIs. Are any other specifications planning an incremental release for the February timeframe?
Well, I think we decided that everyone needs to update to use the Jakarta APIs.
Yeah.
Now, whether there's other features as well, that's a different thing entirely.
Okay.
This was part of the architecture call from last week, correct? Or did I miss anything from the early 20 minutes of this call on that regard? I don't want to repeat myself and ask questions that were already answered.
Yeah, so we discussed it at the start of the call, carrying on from last week's architecture, and basically said yes to EE8 and yes to 3.2 in February. And I'm going to create issues for all the specs because we need all of them to release with the new version. And then there's, I think, I don't know if it's Gordon or someone else is going to start a discussion around whether we want to introduce a parent POM to make that simpler.
What do you mean a parent home? Just for Jakarta, like a new repo, or what's going on? I am confused.
No, like to create a POM for MicroProfile specs that defines all the Jakarta specs as in dependency management, and then each of our specs can inherit that. So they get the version of the spec that is used in MicroProfile without having to add it on their own. Because at the moment, each spec has their own dependency with the version for CDI, JAX-RS, all that kind of stuff. So it's replicated all over the place.
How will that work when there are breaking changes in Jakarta EE9?
Well, shall I? Because we guillotined the time to talk about this, I think. So would it be best for me to create a new thread in the discussion group, and then we can hammer it out there, or do you want to talk about it now?
John, what do you think?
I'll be.
I am always going to ask questions on this matter.
I am looking for. I don't see Emily back on yet, so let's go ahead and chat for another 10 minutes on this topic since we're all here.
Winding back a little tiny bit, I think there'll probably be a reactive messaging spec. I don't think it'll be me pushing the contents of it this time round. Maybe Ken, Clement, and Emily, but I think they plan to do some content in that. But in terms of parent POM, it gets quite. I was going to say it gets quite. It's not. I mean, it's not a technical thing, but it's just having sort of one place to manage the version numbers. When we were talking about what do we do if we've got a security alert and then we have to increment things, and a lot of big projects have a parent POM where it's kind of centrally managed. That means that all the specs, if they're including CDI, they're including the same version of it and things like that, and makes it kind of easier to manage things. But if the best, I think probably the best thing is for us to put it to the Google group, because as Ken said, the last time the idea came up, it wasn't, people had different opinions.
So you mean go back to the Google group for 2 weeks and come back to this call and see where the feedback came and how do we consume it?
I mean, we can. It's a decision that needs to be made. A lot of people think it's a good idea, but it isn't unanimous. So it's probably a good idea to open it up to the group, which is a kind of the most inclusive medium, and then also helps describe the idea rather than doing it verbally here, because lots of different things to take in. And
I have +1 to Gordon. I do the test being informed in open source about things that were just decided on the side, so if we distribute it a little bit longer, but we needed like a deadline if we're talking about this, like a little, like a closure on this.
There might be a natural deadline in what Ken was saying, where all the specs have to update to the Jakarta ones, then it might be easiest to do that at the same time. But I guess that'll be up to people in the group. If everybody thinks that they don't want to do that, then but that's a natural deadline maybe.
So the ones that were not in the architectural call, do you have questions about this? We're discussing not having a major release going from 3.1 to 3.2 to make MicroProfile also be compatible, or with Jakarta E8. Questions, any concerns? That it's not going to be a 4, it's going to be a 3.2, it's going to be just go through with the flow. We're supporting that project, that community, we're part of that community. This will not push MicroProfile to be what others will see owned by Jakarta. This is just showing that we play ball and that we see the value of it, because it's the same as Java EE8. Nothing breaks, nothing changes. Questions to us, to everyone here?
Yeah, I personally think that adopting Jakarta E8 is a natural process, of course. And like we said, 3.2 feels a sensible way to implement that there. But if I'm understanding Emily correctly in the thread that she started, is that she asks whether or not we want to, how did she call it, muddy the puddle or something with Jakarta EE changes and MicroProfile related changes, if you wanted to separate them or not. So are we going to base release in the future adopting Jakarta and evolving MicroProfile putting together, or are we going to separate them in the release schedule that we now have? If that makes sense.
This is about Jakarta E8 or 9 discussion. I
8,
briefly.
9, 8,
Okay.
We're not, only 8. Don't even mention 9.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's for 8. I think the majority of people think this. The moving from Java EE to Jakarta EE is a kind of really small change. And so this should be a minor release. I think we concluded we want to do a minor release, right?
Yeah, as we discussed, yeah.
Yeah.
Even if there are going to be minors bumped just because of the Jakarta E8 update, don't block new features for February release. We have something for health also, which is not breaking. So there is no reason to block this.
Yeah.
So now that Emily's back, we can have the 2020 roadmap discussion, right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So basically my internet connection is very bad. Yeah, so it's basically is I want to bring this up because in like config and fault tolerance specification, we're thinking like our own roadmap to see is like for some particular PRs which release can we target for. So I think we are kind of settled on the February release, which is kind of minor release. So so for the June release, I'm proposing to have the major release. And October release, if Jakarta E9 is released, and also obviously we need to have a runtime, like past the TTKs, and then we can adopt Jakarta E9. I'm not sure whether October release will give sufficient time for that to happen. If not, October release will be minor release. If it's a magic happens, and then I think maybe it's one of I think it's 2020 we have 2 major release. However, from MicroProfile specifications point of view, we still allow 1 major release, and October, if it's a major release, that's only for Java E9, Jakarta E9. I don't know what other people think. So
Emily,
if,
yeah, I have a question. So have we, this is the first time we're talking about the 2020, correct? Or did I miss Google forum?
First, yeah, we hinted in some other thread, but not like focus on this. But we did discuss briefly on the Java EE thread, and Ken was right to say, okay, maybe it's better to have a separate discussion about Jakarta E9. Like I thought, now is a good time to think things ahead, think next year's release, so that give specifications sufficient time to prepare for that.
Yeah, but you know, I think we're jumping the gun here because Jakarta 9 is only being right now talked on how, what is going to happen. I saw Ivar sent a message this morning saying how that will occur and things like that, and I really like his suggestion about scalability of that release. The thing about MicroProfile, and my side, and being biased here, is that if we make the major release only based on Jakarta E9, we will put all our eggs on one project itself, and I don't like that complexity, right? I am blind onto what each extension is doing at the moment and their vision for 220. Why is it that we are not asking the actual microprofilers actively working under each of the projects what they want to do within, and not only inclusive to Jakarta E9, because it is not our job to dictate what comes forth. It is our job to enable those who do within MicroProfile, especially if I am a coder, I want to be able to see the value, navigate the direction, and understand why X and be a part of the discussion. We want those microprofilers to maybe follow up via the forum, create more noise. If we need to add this thread to the media tweet and say, hey, you're a microprofiler, that would be my idea. What do you want? What do you envision for users, but especially coders? Because a user is not exclusive not to be a coder, but it's rare when they both combine. So we want to make sure to not only keep it here and be fixed. There is a danger here that I see. We need to be very careful to police ourselves. But that's my view. I will quiet now and wait for others to comment or bring in extra stuff that I haven't seen.
So,
I got two.
sorry.
Yeah, I got two thoughts. Oh, my video finally. It doesn't look like I'm angry looking off in the distance. So yeah,
I love it.
I don't know why. Yeah, it froze. So where I think MicroProfile 3.0 was literally just Java EE8 rebaselining, right? So you know, we have already done it just from a a Java EE Jakarta EE perspective, but I do like the idea of having some kind of vision for what 2020 could be. That's me personally. We still have the whole growing pains stuff that we'll probably want to restart. It might float into that because right now we have a growing number of specs and a fixed set of specifications that are part of the core platform. Are those the right specs that should be in core? Yada yada yada. So we don't necessarily have to have this conversation here. Sorry, I'm looking at the time here. We got 7 minutes. But I like the idea. Maybe it should be rolled into the growing pains. I don't know.
Kevin,
we haven't even really resolved if we should graduate specs into Jakarta. You know, it tends to be the kind of strongest characters and you know, because if we carry on with this fragmentation, and maybe a company like Oracle could bring out further Java X things, if we don't resolve the fragmentation or we don't work out how we're going to avoid, you know, splitting our efforts going forwards. You know, if we just assume, because I love MicroProfile, I can meet all you lovely people every Tuesday night, and you know, it's the highlight of my week. But we have to kind of resolve this relationship, don't we? And otherwise, we're just splitting our efforts, and to end users, it will create confusion.
Well, from my perspective, and I think I've made this clear to quite a few people, until Jakarta EE has a proven release cadence and cycle, we can't really talk about how we merge, how we operate together, whatever, because it took them 2 years to get Jakarta EE8 out. We don't know how long it's going to take for EE9, which is just a package rename. And then beyond that, talking about features and other stuff, we don't know how regularly they're going to do stuff. We don't know if people are going to use it, because no matter how much some of us might love Jakarta to succeed, there's always the chance that it falls flat because it's just too much churn.
I think that's very true. But if all the players that are involved in MicroProfile stand back and wait, then that's quite a large percentage of people who could contribute. I'm almost finished. I'll be quiet. That's quite a large percentage of the people who could actually contribute technology to Jakarta. So it's a kind of like a locking cycle.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of consider MicroProfile's proven itself over the last 3 years to be able to sustain on its own. Right now, Jakarta has to prove that it can live on its own, and then if it can, then we kind of talk about how we work together to do stuff.
I agree with Ken on this, and I even tweeted on it. I added Ken to this. I think we can't, and this is not a call for us to decide the future of MicroProfile and the connection with Jakarta and the level of what do we move. We're talking about growing pains.
This is a Jakarta community. This is a MicroProfile community hangout.
But we're talking. But Gordon, the difference is that John brought something so important, and we distracted. And it's so amazing what you said, because you see the issues, we see the incoming. I even sent one Jakarta thread to the community of MicroProfile because it was so relevant, right? So I crossed the two of them because I want to make sure they were educated. But John, let's focus here, because you're correct. We have to address this, but not now. The thing is that John brought up growing pains. We, as a community here in this call, should be trying to end Q4 this quarter by cleaning the debt and what we currently have in MicroProfile before we decide to do anything else on the level of what comes next. Even 2020 roadmap, which would be amazing to have, should be included in the growing pains, because why will we go into roadmap and have a current. So much stuff going on. I think every call moving forward in this quarter, we should be having 10, 20 minutes of the growing pains assigned. That would be my recommendation, so that we tackle those issues. We send issues, we PRs. I mean, if we put that to me, everything that has an issue, we have an issue, and then we send a thread and say, on this, what is your thoughts? And like that, we can separate and tackle all the little issues that are growing pains into smaller threads. Like that is not this big thing that no one can see, but we can consume it easily, right? So that is my feedback on this, because 220 is so important, but thinking about it with the current debt that we have, it's not ideal or efficient. So that's my philosophy. Even talking about MicroProfile in Jakarta, Ken is correct. Jakarta EE needs to prove itself. That is Jakarta EE9, right? And some of us are involved. Let's do this, right? But let's clean MicroProfile debts first.
So for so for the roadmap, so this is I don't think we need a lot of discussion. As long as we agree, we already agreed February minor release, and we just target June release in the major, October release, possibly the minor. I do agree for the green pens. And we would like to revisit to see how can we integrate with some other specs in the standalone, like reactive and context propagation. Maybe in the next Hangout we should spend all the time just talk about growing pains, and then come up with a few solutions, and then people can vote.
You know, I think we shouldn't do all the time, but I think we should fix it for the next, the Q4, 20, 30 minutes, just in growing pains, and just 30 minutes tackling. And I think that will force us to get this done. We have 2 months and a half to go. And you're correct, Emily, 220 already we have designed when every release will happen, regardless of whatever goes in it. So that is set. We have the timeline. Now let's clean it. So those ones of you not talking, what do you think? We have 1 minute to go, and John is going to kill me for talking too much.
No, John is real angry. Now we are dead on time.
Oh,
well, I was leaving time for for others to comment. My comment pretty much aligns with Ken and Amelia. Don't forget, it's not just about Jakarta EE. I think kind of becoming successful in its own right first. It's also about the difference in processes and how we approach solving problems that are very different, I think, between the two. So we have to, I think, let Jakarta mature a little bit, not just from, also from a process perspective, to see what kind of processes they come up with. Because right now, I think they're too heavyweight for what we do.
I agree with that too. +1.
All right, with that, top of the hour. Thanks everyone for joining. And there were some folks whose names I don't necessarily always recognize that were on the call. Feel free to speak up and even help take notes. That would be awesome. All right, so same bat time, same bat channel in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.
So glad I made it, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.